What's up, everyone? Welcome to another Card Advantage video. Today we have a recurring segment where we go through the new and interesting card interactions from the new set. Of course, Outsiders is releasing this weekend fully. The pre-release was last weekend. So check out the chapters below if you want to hop around to anything that you think is super interesting or walk through, and you can count how many times we actually do end up saying interesting. Like and subscribe if you haven't, and enjoy. We're going to go ahead and get started with Arachne. So we're kind of going in the order of release notes, how it was written there. So if you want to follow along in text, you can go ahead and open up the release notes. That we'll have a link for that in the description. But the first things are new keywords. Arachne introduces a new keyword named Stealth. Stealth functions basically like aim counters. They don't have any inherent effects, but other things reference them. So Stealth doesn't make your attack do anything different, but Arachne says your first attack with Stealth gains Go Again, or has Go Again rather. So that is a distinction to make. It's nothing special on its own, but other things do end up referencing it.
Oh yeah, and now we have the quiver subtype keyword. So what a quiver means is you can equip a quiver in the weapon slot in addition to a two-handed bow. It's a new special exception to the equipment rules, but you can still only have one quiver equipped at a time. Kind of in the similar vein to offhand weapons like the shields that we've seen before, and it does occupy the weapon slot.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see what kind of new things are cooked up with those quivers. A lot of interesting interactions can be happening. Along with the quiver, this is the first set that we're actually seeing dual class cards. So we have Assassin and Ninja cards, and we also have Assassin and Ranger cards in this set. And so a lot of cool and interesting interactions and different combo builds that people can put together.
Yep. So aside from the new keywords, we have some new tokens. Ponder, of course, is not a new token, but we do have Inertia, Bloodrot Pox, and Frailty. We felt like the tokens themselves explain themselves pretty well, but we did want to call out interactions between them because all four of them break at the beginning of your end phase. So if I go over to Ponder, at the beginning of your end phase, destroy Ponder and draw a card. The first thing I want to say is you don't have priority during your end phase. So if you draw a sigil, you cannot play it. You just have to arsenal it, but you can pitch it. This is relevant for Bloodrot Pox. So you can order your Ponder token to break first. You draw into a card. If it's a blue, then your Bloodrot Pox breaks. You can pitch for the Bloodrot Pox to prevent the 2 damage. Additionally, with Inertia in Ponder token, you can order the Inertia to break first, and then its effect is gone. Then the Ponder token breaks, and you draw the card off the Ponder, and you do end up getting to Arsenal. So these have lots of different things around them where you can order them. Keep that in mind. The turn player is the owner of the effects, and they get to choose what order they resolve them in if they all went on the stack at the same time.
So now I get to talk to you all about Uzuri here, and I'm going to explain the ability a little bit and how the timing of it works. So when you activate Uzuri, banishing the card from your hand face down is part of the cost. Is part of the cost usually in this game is everything that comes before the colon. I believe that's what it's called. It's the 2 dots is what I call it. So it is going to be part of the cost, and then afterwards, after you activate the ability and pay the cost of banishing the face down, you then pass priority to the opponent, and they get to respond before you resolve the effect, which the resolution indicates flipping it face up and going onto the combat chain. So then there's a few very interesting interactions when it comes to the priority of effect. And that I'm going to pass it over to Cody over there for the first one.
As we all are kind of somewhat afraid or a little nervous about with Uzuri is being able to Uzuri react, banish, and then flip up a CNC. Something interesting to note is that even if Uzuri banishes that CNC face down, like Steven mentioned, you have a window of opportunity before you see what card it's going to be to play a defense reaction, and then Uzuri's ability resolves. So therefore, in theory, you could actually defense react against CNC, provided you react to Uzuri's ability first. Same thing for Wreak Havoc, which was released in the set, which also has a no defense reactions can be played to Wreak Havoc's chain link.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So another good to know thing for Uzuri's ability is cards that say when they attack or when this card is played. that condition is not met if you flash it in due to Uzuri's ability. Uzuri's ability does not say play it. It does not say attack with it. It says put the banished card onto the active chain link as the attacking card. So what this implies is for something like Ravenous Rabble that says when this attacks, reveal the top card and do the -X, that trigger would not get hit. So if you flash in Ravenous Rabble off of Uzuri, it will always be a 0 for 5 go again. And then alternatively, E-Strike has an additional cost, and well, the additional cost is skipped because you're not actually paying for the card, so it just gets flashed in. And additionally, modes are chosen when you play the card. So you will not end up getting to choose a mode on E-Strike if you flash it in off of Uzuri. So these are a couple things to keep in mind. Some of the cards are stronger than you would think, and some of the cards are not as strong as you would think when it comes to flashing them in off of Uzuri's ability.
Yeah, so Rabble's like hitting Gorg Tome off the top every time with Uzuri.
True. Very true. The next would be another interesting thing about Uzuri's ability is that effects on the stealth cards themselves do not transfer when they leave. So everything, just to be clear, everything that is face up on your attack link that we'll be talking about here is still in play as long as a card is face up. So for Uzuri's example, and this card right here, Backstab says defense reactions can be played to Backstab's chain link. So when you play Backstab and then we go over your opponent defends, we go to the reaction phase. When you activate Uzuri's ability, your opponent cannot still play defense reactions because of Backstab's clause. But when it resolves, you flip it. If the new card you have doesn't have any clauses like that, then the opponent then has an opportunity to play defense reactions. Backstab maybe is one of the stronger effects to play with CNC. That would be a very bad thing for your opponent if they can't play defense reactions or in the whole resolution. But some effects that do stay are stuff like Shred that targets the opponent's cards. So let's say the same with Backstab. You play Backstab, the opponent's defense with the cards, and then your first attack reaction priority that you get, you play Shred, targeting the opponent's cards. It is defending an assassin card, so it is legal to play. Then you use Uzuri's ability, and then you flip up a non-assassin card. Shred's effect will still stay even though that happened, because it's still resolved when it was defending an assassin card. And it is affecting your opponent's cards in this case. And then the last thing would be that you can't just activate Uzuri's ability anytime you want. There has to be a stealth card on the chain link that you're activating on, because Uzuri states target stealth card for her effect.
Another new hero that was introduced with Outsiders is Riptide. He's a ranger, and his ability says whenever you play a card from hand, you may put a card from hand face down into your arsenal. And whenever a trap you control triggers, deal 1 damage to the attacking hero. Something to note about this is it's every time. It's not a once per turn ability. So you can theoretically play multiple cards from hand and get that trigger every single time you play that card from hand. It's similar to Reload, but something different about it is that it does not require any empty arsenal zones, meaning if you are playing New Horizon and you already have a card face up and you play a card from hand with Riptide, you are still able to resolve Riptide's ability by putting a card from your hand face down, whereas Reload states that it has to be an empty arsenal zone, or no cards in your arsenal, I apologize. So that's a key differentiator between Reload and Riptide's ability.
So the next thing with regards to Riptide is the actual traps that he can use in his deck related to his trap ability. His ability does say when a trap triggers, which means there is a condition on all of his trap cards, and you only deal the damage when that condition is met. So when Buzzsaw Trap defends an attack with damage greater than its base, that means the trigger is triggered when it defends an attack with damage greater than its base. If you're just defending a normal attack that wasn't buffed, then that did not trigger and you would not deal 1 damage to the opposing hero. Additionally, with regards to the traps, there was an errata on the Crucible of War specific traps. Previously, those traps said traps can only be played from Arsenal, so that was actually inherent to the trap subtype of the card, but the errata removes that restriction from the subtype and added it to these cards directly. So Pitfall traps still can only be played from Arsenal, but it's just because it says it on the card rather than it being a trap. This implies that all of Riptide's traps, they can still be played from hand because they don't have this restriction on it. Unfortunately, it did not make the Crucible of War traps any better. They're still themselves. But the last thing to talk about with the Crucible of War ones is the trigger on these is when this defends. So this doesn't have a condition saying when this defends and attack with a certain condition. It literally just says when this defends. So every single time you block with Pitfall Trap, it will deal 1 damage to the opposing hero if you're Riptide, because defending is the condition.
And because of Riptide's ability, these traps inherently become a little bit okay to use in Riptide, because you can play a card from hand, which is one of his normal traps, and possibly get that trigger. Reload, put a card in Arsenal face down, which could be this Crucible of War trap, Pitfall Trap, Tripwire Trap, or Rock Slide Trap, and then get the additional trigger because these Crucible of War ones come with on defend triggers, and therefore they're going to trigger basically every time with Riptide.
Yep.
True.
Yep. So Riptide and Uzuri were the new and interesting. Riptide, Uzuri, and Arachne were the new and interesting heroes to talk about. Everyone already is familiar with Azalea, Katsu, and Benji. So the rest of this video, we're going to be going through specific card rulings and interactions just generally throughout the set and the different class cards.
Yeah, so the first card on our docket that we wanted to talk about was Cyclone Roundhouse. So Cyclone Roundhouse says it has the combo keyword, and when combo is achieved, it states that at the beginning of the reaction step, banish a random defending card from each chain link. So what we wanted to make the distinction here is, what is a card? So the cards are obviously the cards that your opponent put to defend on the chain link from their hand. But cards also include equipment. So if your opponent defended it with an equipment on an earlier chain link, Cyclone Roundhouse could theoretically randomly choose it and banish it, making them lose that equipment piece and losing likely some value in return there. Another card that also states looking at the cards is going to be Spreading Plague. So in the same vein, equipment are cards. So if your opponent blocks, let's say, with 2 cards from hand and then with one of their equipment pieces, playing Spreading Plague would give the opponent 3 Blood Rod Pox tokens. Ouch.
The next card on our list here is Dishonor. It's going to be quite a popular one for Katsu in many of his matchups. It specifically states it's a combo card. If Bonds of Ancestry was the last attack this combat chain, Dishonor gains +2 power. And when this hits a hero, if you control Surging Strike, Descendant Gustwave, and Bonds of Ancestry, that hero loses all abilities for the rest of the game. Something to note about this card is Surging Strike, Descendant Gustwave, and Bonds of Ancestry do not have to be in that order to get this trigger for losing the hero ability when it hits. Basically, what it means for the opponent is essentially like a sleep dart for the rest of the game, and their card text on their hero is blank. There's no ability for the rest of the entire game. Big sad.
Big sad.
So the next card that we're going to be talking about is Amplifying Arrow. So the first thing I wanted to say is each individual buff is an instance of gaining damage. So if you were to play 2 different Ranger buffs, Lace with Blood Rot and then Lace with Inertia, for example, it would be a base 2. It would get 3 from Blood Rot and then another one from its own. And then it would get 3 from Inertia and another one is from its own. So it'd end up being 10 damage total. So that is good. The more buffs you can do, obviously the effect gets stronger and stronger. And then the other thing is that this is a replacement effect. So generally you know it's a replacement effect if it says instead. So instead of it gaining 3 and 1, it's actually making that give it +4 if you did a Lace with Blood Rot, for example.
Another really interesting one that we got in Outsiders is the equipment piece, Flick Knives. It's going to be one that's probably going to be talked about quite a bit, have lots of rules interactions that get questioned. As Flick Knives, it's an arm piece as an assassin or ninja. Once per turn, attack reaction, cost 0. Target dagger you control that is not on the active chain link deals 1 damage to target hero. If damage is dealt this way, the daggers hit, destroy the dagger. It's interesting to note that, 1, you have to control the dagger and it has not be on the active chain link. So it can still be like a weapon that you've not swung with this turn, or it can be a prior chain link, but you have to control it. If damage is dealt this way, it is considered a hit event with the dagger. and the dagger is considered to have hit. This matters for Arachne and Uzuri with the nerve scalpel, the spider's bite, the orbital one that I can't remember the name of specifically. Those daggers have hit triggers or hit events that cause additional effects, so those all matter. And the other things to note about it is if the dagger hits this way, the attack on the active chain link is not to consider it a hit. It's relevant for effects that are conditional only on the attack hitting, such as in Benji. He has an on-hit effect with the attack, and so that doesn't trigger. Another great example with Mask Momentum is the typical attack pattern of Kodachi attack. So if you attack with the first Kodachi and it hits, then you attack with the second Kodachi and they block that second Kodachi, you then would react with Flick Knives, destroying the first dagger. Therefore, this chain link will be considered to have hit, which is this Kodachi, and therefore the next attack is threatening Mask of Momentum if they let that one hit as well. And so that's how you can use Flick Knives and Mask of Momentum in combination with each other to push more threatening damage or at least threaten more chain links.
So one more interaction with Flick Knives is Mask of Shifting Perspectives. It says if you destroy it, whenever a dagger hits this turn, you may put a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck. If you do, draw a card. If you Flick Knives a dagger from a previous chain link, since that dagger is considered to have hit, it will trigger the Mask of the Shifting Perspectives condition, and you do get to do the Sing Below effect on it, basically. So that's a smaller one than the complicated Mask of Momentum one, but the daggers that are dealing damage off of Flick Knives are considered to have hit for things like that.
They're mostly considered to have hit because the cards themselves, Flick Knives and the other cards that reference this, all say they are considered to have hit on them. Usually they wouldn't if it did not have that text. Yeah, speaking of dagger effects, we have Concealed Blade. And this will says target assassin or ninja attack action card gains +1. And then when that attack hits, you get to equip a dagger from your inventory. So here we're just going to talk about what the inventory means and what you can do and how many daggers you can have in your deck. So for limited formats, you can have any number of token rarity cards in your card pool. So you would have 100 Spider's Bite or 100 Kodachis to choose from Concealed Knives. So if you open an absurd number of Concealed Knives in your pool, you can keep equipping them to your delight. But you will need to have an empty weapon zone to equip them. If you don't have an empty weapon zone, so you didn't flick it or hurl it in any way, then the effect will fail and you will keep the ones you have equipped at the time. Also, if you have a two-handed weapon equipped and you only have 2 weapon zones, so that also will make the effect fail. So a hero that could use this card, for example, would be Fi. So if you have Searing Ember Blade with Fi and you hit with the Concealed Knives attack that was buffed in that way, you won't be able to equip anything in that regard. And I mentioned limited format for the constructed format. You can have as many as allows per the constructed rules. So for Blitz, you could only have 2 of them in your deck. So you'd have 2 Kodachis, for example. But in Classic Constructed, you could have 3 Kodachis, for example.
Absolutely. And moving on that same vein with more Flick Knives types of effect or dagger types of effect, we have Hurl. Obviously similar to Flick Knives in that sense of destroying daggers. What we wanted to point out on this one specifically is that this is on attack trigger. So whereas Flick Knives is in the reaction step, the Hurl is when you attack with Hurl, you may pay 1 and then destroy a dagger to then deal a damage. Therefore, when you activate Hurl or pay that additional cost and you are an assassin with Spider's Bites, then Spider's Bites effects would be in place by the time the defending hero goes to defend with a card. So it's something interesting to note. Obviously, it's really, really powerful late game in the limited formats. Obviously, it can be game ending if you're at 1.
And then we have another Mask of Malicious Manifestation. It's a relatively interesting effect because you're looking at the same thing as we mentioned before about what is part of the cost of this effect. So to pay for this card, you have to pay a resource, then also put a card from your hand or arsenal on the bottom of your deck and destroy the masks. So all those things need to occur before your opponent can have a reaction and or anything else to respond to this effect happening. Once that effect triggers, though, you start revealing cards from the top of your deck. If you happen to not reveal any attack, then the effect just fails. And then if you happen to put an attack with the effect itself, it will see it in the deck by the time the effect resolves. So you could technically grab that card again if that were to happen.
So as we mentioned in the start of the video, we added dual class cards, and some of the strongest ones that we got in this set of Outsiders is all of the Codexes. First one we got is Codex of Bloodrot. And the one of the things we wanted to notice and point out about the Codexes is all of their effects are not optional. So Codex says you have to put a card from your hand face down for both you and your opponent in your arsenal. So if you have an empty arsenal zone and you have a card in hand, you have to abide by the effect, and so does your opponent. And the way that it goes is in the turn player order. So the turn player goes first, and then clockwise around the table if you're playing UPF or something like that. But mostly it just goes the turn player, then the non-turn player.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So for the other two codexes, Frailty and Inertia, they both have effects that do something and then force the hero to discard. I just wanted to mention, if you do not have a card in hand, you cannot discard a card, and it doesn't fail. Like, the codex still gets casted, you still got your card. You don't have to meet the discard condition for the first thing to happen. So if you play Codex of Frailty and you have no more cards in hand, you're basically plussing by the Ponder token and the card you got from the graveyard, and you don't have to discard. But it still forces your opponent to discard if they hit if they had an empty arsenal. They still have to do that, and they still have to discard a card. So the codexes are very strong, and just keep in mind some sequencing things, and you can get pretty good value out of the effects.
Yeah, very valuable.
So the last card we're going to talk about here is Amnesia. Now, there's a bevy of rules of what it means to have a name. I know, very philosophical, so we're going to put that rules replies article into the description of the video. We're going to talk about some effects that we think you should know at this time. So for Amnesia and self-referential effects, they do still happen. So as a big example is Snatch. This card says, if Snatch hits, draw a card. Technically, if you can easily replace this effect of, if this hits, draw a card, it is self-referential. Therefore, it is not stopped by Amnesia. The other thing I want to talk about Amnesia is about owning and controlling. And for that, I'm going to be reading Amnesia's effects so that we can all be super up to speed about it. So when this hits a hero, cards and tokens they own lose and can't gain names until the start of your next turn. So what does it mean to be the owner of a card? It means it started in your deck, it's in your hand, and you were the one who put it there in the first place. So, and that's going to be the key thing. It's whoever put it there or created it. So for the sense of tokens, and especially in the set of Outsiders, if you create a Bloodrot Pox token for the opponent, you still own it, but they control it. So what this means, especially in limited, and this might happen to you, is going to be Infectious Host. If you get hit, if your opponent, as the example that was, and the card that was pulled up, plays Codex of Bloodrot, they give you a Bloodrot Pox token, and then they hit you with Amnesia. And then it goes to your turn, and you attack them with Infectious Host. What happens? In this situation, your opponent is the owner of the Bloodrot Pox token because they created it, but you still control it. So when Infectious Host says, if you control a Bloodrot Pox token, or a token of Frailty and so on, you will create it under the opponent effect based on the specific wording of what it means to own.
Yeah, just to further confuse everyone after Steven's very good explanation, if you hit your opponent with Amnesia and somehow I'd go again, and you have a Bloodrot Pox token they gave you on their prior turn, and then you attack with Infectious Host, that would not cause you to give them the token because
they own
the token under your control, and they were hit by Amnesia. Therefore, you don't own something named a Bloodrot Pox token.
Clear
Yeah.
as mud.
Yeah, very interesting.
It's a little
text
tricky,
there for sure.
but it's very interesting.
Yeah, I definitely encourage you guys to go check out the rules reprise section. It also talks about an interaction with Frostex. It might turn out that Amnesia is a good counterplay to the Frost combo. I'll let you guys figure that out for yourself. But that is going to be the end of our cards and rules reprise discussions. So if you did enjoy it, let us know. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. We'll try to answer it. Also, if we got a card wrong, please let us know and we'll discuss it. We're definitely not above that. And if you're at an event, if you're at a ProQuest or anything, even an Armory, always remember to call a judge if you have a question. And also, you have the ability to appeal to a judge if you're at a bigger event and there's a head judge. If you don't know if the ruling's correct or you want a second opinion, that's totally okay too. Keep on hand the rules reprises, the card release notes and things like that, and the full rules documents. Those are always good to have handy. But always remember, ask a judge. We are not the authority on these things. We're not telling you that you can say you saw it in our video so you can do it at an event. But if you saw it in your rules reprise or you saw it in the rules documents, then you could use it to discuss with a judge about the legality of a interaction.
And Joshua Scott, we trust.
Yes. Yeah, just be respectful when you're talking to him.
Yes.
Hey, I saw this and this is how it is. And at the end of the day, they are going to be last at the even if they maybe got the ruling wrong at the moment. It's still important to just be respectful, continue your game as you can, and just people are human and they make mistakes, and that's okay. Just if you approach the ruling in a respectful manner, you very likely get the result you're looking for. In as long as it's within the confines on the rules.
Yeah, so, for sure.
Yeah.
We appreciate everyone tuning in and watching. Keep an eye out. We always stream gameplay on Tuesdays, and our teammates Sean and Pierre are doing a recurring deck building segment on Wednesdays now. You can go back and watch their first one with Katsu, and like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Peace.
Peace.
Peace, everybody.